What if I told you that the most sophisticated fortresses in history were not built of stone and concrete, but of animal skins and wooden poles? European colonists, finding themselves in the prairies in winter, often froze to death in their log cabins, while the indigenous people felt perfectly comfortable in their light tents. It seems impossible, but the Indians of the Great Plains created a unique life support system that worked flawlessly even at -40 degrees. Their camp was not just a place to sleep, but a complex engineering mechanism where every detail was of vital importance. In winter, the Great Plains turned into a white hell with winds capable of knocking a horse off its feet. But these people learned to use the very fury of nature to their advantage. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how basic physics and knowledge of the terrain allowed them to survive where modern technology simply fails. What if everything you've been taught about architecture is outdated in the face of ancient wisdom? The tepee, the dwelling of the nomadic peoples of the plains, is often mistakenly considered a simple tent, but in fact it is an aerodynamic masterpiece. The conical shape was chosen not by chance and not for beauty, but as the only way to withstand the squalls of open spaces. The wind hitting the wall of the cone does not encounter stiff resistance, but smoothly flows around it on both sides, pressing the structure to the ground. The stronger the wind blew, the more stable the dwelling became, unlike the square houses of Europeans, which sailed and collapsed. Engineers today would call this ideal streamlining, but the Indians came to this conclusion through centuries of trial and error. The frame of poles was not erected haphazardly, but with the windrows in mind to ensure maximum structural rigidity. The poles were tied at the top with a special knot that acted as a hinge, allowing the entire structure to move slightly without breaking. The cover made of sewn bison skins was stretched so tightly that it sounded like a drum in the wind, not allowing a single fold to block the flow of air. The entrance was always located on the east side, facing away from the prevailing westerly winds that brought snowstorms. The cone shape itself prevented snow from accumulating on the roof, allowing it to slide down under its own weight. This saved the inhabitants from having to clear the roof and eliminated the risk of collapse under the weight of precipitation. The lower edge of the cover was never fixed to the ground in summer, but in winter the strategy changed dramatically. The Indians used heavy stones or drove stakes so deep that they could only be pulled out with a piece of frozen ground. Inside the dwelling, a microclimate was created that was radically different from what was happening outside. Even when a blizzard with zero visibility raged outside, the interior remained quiet, interrupted only by the crackling of the fire. It was a shelter designed for conditions in which no modern tourist equipment could survive. It is interesting to note that the slope of the back wall of the tepee was steeper than the front, which made it even more resistant to head-on wind gusts. This shift in the center of gravity also allowed smoke to be more effectively removed from the hearth. The entire camp consisted of such modules, each of which was an autonomous fortress capable of withstanding the forces of nature. The loss of a single dwelling was a rare occurrence, and even if it did happen, neighbors could quickly take in the victims. The system of mutual aid was as much a part of the architecture of survival as the wooden poles. Building materials were prepared in advance, as finding suitable wood in the steppe was a difficult task. Lodgepole pine poles were worth their weight in gold. They were carefully preserved, repaired, and transported thousands of kilometers. The skins used for roofing were treated in a special way, impregnated with fat and smoke to prevent moisture penetration. This material did not stiffen in the cold and remained elastic, which was critical for retaining heat. Any crack or hole in the covering could be fatal, so the dwelling was inspected regularly. Every element of this structure was tested by time and the harsh climate of the Great Plains. There was no place here for decorative elements that did not serve a functional purpose. The beauty of the tepee lay in its absolute rationality and efficiency. It was a house that could be assembled and disassembled in an hour, but which provided protection more reliable than stone walls. We are very interested in hearing your point of view. What do you think about the reliability of such structures compared to modern tents? Write about it in the comments. Are you ready to learn the truth about how the choice of location could save or destroy an entire tribe? Winter camps were never set up in the open steppe, where bison hunters roamed in the summer. With the onset of cold weather, the tribes left the highlands and open plateaus for deep river valleys. This was a strategic decision dictated by the need to find natural protection from the wind. High riverbanks and folds in the terrain served as giant natural walls, blocking the icy air currents. The temperature difference between the top of a hill and the lowlands near the river could be as much as 10 degrees. The second most important factor was the presence of forests, which in the prairies grew in narrow strips only along the water. Poplars and willows not only provided fuel for fires, but also created an additional windbreak. The trees slowed down the wind and broke up snowdrifts, preventing them from covering the entire camp. Without this forest, survival would have been impossible, as the steppe dung was often buried under deep snow in winter. Proximity to water also solved the problem of thirst, as melting snow requires a huge amount of energy and firewood. A hole in the river provided access to running water, which was much more economical and safer. The camp stretched along the bends of the river, following the contours of the landscape to make the most of the cover. The Indians were excellent at reading the terrain and knew exactly where snowdrifts would form and where the ground would remain relatively clear. They avoided narrow canyons where sudden floods or avalanches could occur, choosing wide terraces instead. This required a deep knowledge of the region's geography, which was passed down from generation to generation. A mistake in choosing a location could cost the entire tribe their lives if a blizzard caught them in an unfavorable spot. It was also important to consider the availability of feed for horses, which we will discuss later. But it was the river valleys that provided this opportunity. Tree bark and dry grass in the lowlands were the only available resources during the dead season. In addition, game could be found in the forest, which also hid from the wind in the thickets. Deer and elk descended to the rivers, which made hunting easier and allowed people to stay close to their homes. In this way, the camp became part of the ecosystem, integrating into it rather than opposing it. Winter camps could be used for years, and people returned to the same proven locations. These locations were known to all the elders and were kept in memory as the most valuable maps. Often, different tribes would enter into a tacit truce during the winter so as not to wage war in conditions where nature already wanted to kill you. Survival became a priority over old grudges and territorial disputes. The river became the artery of life, providing protection, water, food, and warmth. But even in an ideal location, nature could present a deadly surprise in the form of a change in the riverbed or the fall of old trees. Therefore, the camp was never static. It could shift and be rebuilt during the winter. People constantly monitored the condition of the ice, the level of snow, and the behavior of animals. It was a life of constant readiness for change, but with a firm foundation in the knowledge of their ancestors. How important do you think the ability to read the landscape is for a modern person who finds themselves in the wild? Want to know a secret that will change your perception of warmth? The main problem with any winter shelter is not the cold, but condensation and smoke, which can kill faster than frost. In teepees, this problem was solved with an ingenious invention called an ozon, or inner lining. This was an additional layer of skins or fabric that was stretched inside the dwelling along the walls to human height. The secret was that there was an air gap between the outer covering and this inner screen. Cold air from the street entered under the outer edge of the teepee but did not enter the living area. It passed into this gap between the walls, heated up and rushed upward toward the smoke hole. This constant flow of air created a powerful draft that pulled all the smoke from the fire outside. The result was a chimney effect, where the living space was protected from drafts by a warm air plug. Without this lining, it would have been impossible to live in a teepee in winter due to the smoke and cold from the ground. In addition to ventilation, the ozan served as an excellent heat insulator, creating a thermos effect. The heat from the fire was reflected by the skins and remained inside, not escaping through the thin outer walls. The space behind the lining was often used to store things, creating an additional buffer against the cold. This invention turned a light tent into a warm house where you could sit without outer clothing. The engineering idea here was to control invisible air currents. Many researchers who visited the Indians in winter were surprised by the freshness of the air inside the dwellings, with a constantly burning fire. The secret was precisely in this double wall, which functioned like a modern climate control system. Moisture did not accumulate on the walls, turn into frost, or drip on sleeping people. All vapors escaped along with the smoke through the upper opening. This prevented dampness, which is the main enemy in winter conditions, leading to illness. Installing the ozon was a mandatory ritual in preparation for winter, and the comfort of the whole family depended on the quality of its fit. The skins for it were selected with particular care and were often decorated with drawings telling the story of the family. It was not just a functional detail, but an element of comfort, cutting off the harsh outside world. The space inside the ozon was a safe zone where children played and warriors rested. It was this detail that made the teepee a unique dwelling, surpassing many stationary buildings of that time. European tents of that time did not have such a system and often turned into ice cellars or gas chambers. The Indians, on the other hand, understood the physics of convection intuitively, observing nature and fire. This technology allowed them to live in a climate that was considered unsuitable for civilized people. Even in the most severe frosts, the temperature inside was maintained at a comfortable level. This did not require complex stoves. It was enough to direct the airflows correctly. Don't forget to like this if you are impressed by this ancient air conditioning technology. What if I showed you how to control the elements with a single rope? The fire in the center of the dwelling was the true heart of the camp, but it required masterful control, especially during winter storms. Inside the conical tent, the flame was not just a source of heat, but a complex engineering element on which ventilation depended. Smoke valves, or the so-called ears of the teepee, located at the very top, were a key tool for controlling draft. These were two separate pieces of skin that were not sewn shut but remained movable. Long, thin poles were attached to them, which went down to the base of the dwelling outside. This system allowed the chimney opening to be adjusted directly from the ground without going outside or climbing onto the roof. The inhabitants turned these valves according to the wind, closing the windward side and opening the leeward side wide. This created a vacuum that literally sucked the smoke out of the room, similar to the principle of a chimney. If the valves were positioned incorrectly, the wind would blow the smoke back into the dwelling, making it unbearable to stay there. The skill of controlling smoke valves was honed from early childhood, as a mistake could fill the dwelling with a pungent stench in a matter of seconds. Women who traditionally owned teepees handled the poles with the dexterity of experienced sailors changing sails. During a heavy storm or snowfall, the valves could be almost completely closed, leaving only a narrow gap for carbon monoxide to escape. In the event of heavy rain, the poles were crossed so that the valves closed over the opening, forming a reliable protective canopy. This kept the heat inside but required special attention to the quality of the fuel. To keep the fire burning cleanly with poor draft, it was necessary to choose wood that did not smoke. The Indians used dry poplar or willow branches, which produced a hot, even flame and minimal soot. In addition, these types of wood hardly sparked at all, which was critical for the preservation of the dwelling itself. A random spark could burn through dry skins and tires, so they tried not to use coniferous species that shot out embers. Thriftiness in fuel was a harsh law, as gathering firewood in deep snow in winter was incredibly hard work. In treeless prairie areas, dried bison dung cakes were often used as the main fuel. This fuel smoldered slowly and hotly like peat, providing excellent heat for warming. The fire inside the teepee was small, not at all like the huge pioneer fires from Hollywood movies. The Indians said that white men build big fires and sit far away from them, while Indians build small fires and sit close to them. The hearth was built in a special shallow pit, carefully lined with river stones. This design allowed it to accumulate heat and function like a heating battery. The stones were heated by the flames and continued to give off gentle heat even when the fire burned down to red embers. This allowed them to maintain a comfortable temperature late into the night without having to constantly add wood. The efficiency of such a system was remarkable. An armful of brushwood was enough to heat a family for an entire evening. Dry moss, bundles of grass, or specially prepared birch bark rolled into tubes were used for quick kindling. In conditions of high humidity and snow, the ability to quickly start a fire with frozen hands was a matter of life and death. The fire not only provided warmth, but also illuminated the dwelling, creating a unique atmosphere of safety and comfort in the middle of the icy desert. The light from the hearth passing through the translucent skins of the teepee transformed the camp at night into a cluster of glowing cones. The whole family gathered around the fire, engaging in leisurely conversation, with the elders telling legends, mending clothes, and preparing food. The hearth was a sacred center that was treated with great respect and reverence. It was forbidden to throw trash or sharp objects into the fire, as this could offend the spirit of the fire. Ashes from the fire were not thrown away, but were used for household needs, such as tanning leather. Often, ashes were poured around the base of the teepee outside, creating an additional insulating layer for warmth. Sometimes hot stones or coals were used for heating, which were carried in special containers. Such stones, wrapped in old leather, were placed in bed under fur blankets to warm up before bedtime. This allowed the sleeping area to be warmed up, even if the air in the dwelling cooled down by morning. Fire was perceived as a living being, as a partner that required constant care and attention. The ability to negotiate with fire and wind was the main survival skill of nomads on the windswept plains. On the harshest nights, the fire was maintained by a person on duty who monitored the height of the flames and the position of the smoke vents. This ensured that the family would not freeze and, more importantly, would not suffocate from smoke while sleeping. The system had been so refined over centuries of practice that even a sudden change in wind in the middle of the night did not catch people off guard. All actions to adjust the poles were performed automatically as an unconditional reflex, often without even waking up completely. Could you keep the fire going all night in such conditions? Eating in winter was not just a meal, but a way of loading a fuel into the body's biological reactor. In severe frost, the human body expended energy at a frantic rate just to keep warm and not freeze. Ordinary food was not suitable here, as something as high in calories and compact as possible was required. The main secret of the winter diet was pemmican, an energy concentrate that did not spoil for years. It was a unique mixture of dried and powdered bison meat, rendered fat, and dried berries. Most often, local bird cherry or urga berries were used, which added a pleasant sourness and had preservative properties. In terms of calorie content and nutritional value, pemmican surpassed any modern dry rations or energy bars. To obtain 1 kilogram of this product, it was necessary to process and dry almost 4 kilograms of fresh meat. This made it an incredibly dense source of nutrients. A small bag of this product could sustain a warrior's strength for several days of arduous travel. Hunters and scouts carried it in belt pouches so they could eat while riding, without stopping for a break. This gave them a tremendous tactical advantage over any enemy or inclement weather. In cold conditions, the body required a huge amount of calories, and lean meat simply could not provide them. Consuming only protein without fat in severe frost could lead to rapid loss of strength and even illness. Fatty food worked inside a person like a slowly burning log in a fire, providing long and steady heat. Pemmican could be eaten dry on the go, biting off pieces of the briquette like hard cheese. However, when there was time and firewood available, it was used to cook a thick, nutritious soup called rubo. This hot dish instantly satisfied hunger and restored the body's heat balance. This strategic reserve was stored in special leather bags called parfleche, which were waterproof and very durable. They were made from rawhide, which was dried on stretchers, giving it the shape of a thick envelope. The outside of these bags was often painted with geometric patterns indicating the family to which they belong. The storage system was designed so that rodents or moisture could not get to the valuable supplies. The loss of food in winter meant starvation, so storage was taken with the utmost seriousness and responsibility. Sometimes part of the supplies were hidden in special camouflaged pits in the ground to preserve them in case of a sudden enemy attack. In addition to pemmican, the Indians actively harvested dried roots, such as prairie turnips or timshuela. The roots were braided into long plaits and dried so that they could be soaked in broth for thickness in winter. They also collected various berries which retained their vitamins even when dried and saved them from vitamin deficiency. Winter hunting continued, but it was more of a supplement to the main diet than a guaranteed source of food. Deep snow hindered the hunters' rapid movement, and animals often retreated to remote, sheltered valleys. Fresh meat was considered a delicacy and a real treat that lifted people's spirits on dark winter evenings. It was impossible to rely solely on the hunter's luck, as blizzards could trap people in their homes for many days. Pemmican was insurance, a guarantee that the tribe would survive any natural disasters and food shortages. Without this supply, survival in the open steppe would have been virtually impossible. This product was so valuable that it later became the main currency in trade with European fur companies. It was the perfect food for nomads, light, compact, and incredibly filling. Fur traders quickly realized that without Indian pemmican, they would not survive the long winter expeditions. Cooking in winter took place inside the teepee, which also added warmth and humidity to the dry, frosty air. Hot pemmican soup warmed people from the inside, stimulating blood circulation and restoring strength to frozen limbs. It was an important moment of family unity around the life-saving hearth. The diet was monotonous but perfectly balanced in terms of protein and fat, which prevented exhaustion. Vitamins were obtained from berries and herbal decoctions, which were drunk instead of tea. Infusions of pine needles or rose hips reliably protected people from scurvy and strengthened their immunity. It was a diet optimized by centuries of experience for survival in extreme cold. The absence of excess weight and high physical activity allowed the Indians to use the energy they received efficiently. Their metabolism adapted to seasonal changes, switching to a mode of maximum heat conservation. Food was perceived as a sacred gift, and not a single crumb was wasted. The food system was integrated into the overall life cycle of the camp. Ready to learn the secret of clothing that worked better than modern membrane suits? Native Americans did not wear fabric clothing that gets wet and loses heat. They dressed in animal skins that are evolutionarily adapted to cold weather. Layering was the key principle. A soft deerskin undershirt, leggings, and an upper cape made of bison hide with the wool on the inside. The air trapped between the fibers of the fur created an impenetrable thermal barrier around the body. The bison cape, or robe, was a versatile item, a coat during the day and a blanket at night. The footwear deserves special attention. Moccasins were made of smoked leather, which was breathable but did not let moisture through. In winter, moccasins were made larger so that dry grass or bison wool could be inserted inside for insulation. This worked like a modern insole and sock at the same time, wicking moisture away from the foot. If the grass got wet, it was simply thrown away and replaced with a new, dry portion. Feet stayed warm even after long walks in the snow. Special attention was paid to protecting the hands and head, through which most of the heat escapes. Mittens were sewn from otter or beaver skins, whose fur is exceptionally warm and durable. Hats were often made from wolf or fox skins, leaving the ears and tails for beauty and spiritual protection. Clothes were decorated with embroidery and porcupine quills, which made them not only functional, but also a status symbol. Every stitch was important, strengthening the seams and preventing tears. Women constantly monitored the condition of their clothes, mending them and drying them by the fire every evening. Wet clothing was deadly dangerous, so drying it was a mandatory ritual before bedtime. Leather clothing required special care to prevent it from stiffening after getting wet. It was kneaded by hand and impregnated with animal fat and brains for softness. It was a never-ending process of maintaining one's second skin in working condition. Warriors on a hunt or expedition could use the fat by applying it directly to the skin of their face and hands to protect against frostbite. This layer of fat created a film that prevented the wind from drying and freezing the skin. This simple method allowed them to stay in the cold for hours without irreversible consequences. Clothing was not just clothing, it was technology refined over centuries. It was possible to sleep in the snow, ride a horse, and fight in it. European clothing of that time, made of wool and cotton, was heavy, restricted movement, and took a long time to dry. The Native American costume was light, anatomical, and ideal for an active lifestyle. It did not interfere with blood circulation, which is critically important in the cold. Why do you think modern clothing manufacturers are returning to the principle of layering that Native Americans used hundreds of years ago? Deep snow in winter could be a deadly trap, turning any movement into hard labor and making hunting almost impossible. An ordinary person would quickly become exhausted, sinking into snowdrifts and risk freezing to death in a matter of hours. To avoid being trapped in camp for months on end, the peoples of the plains borrowed snowshoes from their northern neighbors. These were ingeniously simple, lightweight wooden frames, cleverly woven with rawhide straps. This design distributed a person's weight over a large area. Thanks to this invention, hunters could literally float over snowdrifts, sinking only a couple of centimeters instead of falling waist deep. This gave people a huge advantage over large animals in winter. Moose and deer got stuck in deep snow, lost speed, and quickly tired when trying to escape. Hunters on snowshoes could calmly pursue their prey, saving their strength for the decisive lunge. This technology transformed the harsh winter from a time of hunger into a season of successful hunting. The design of snowshoes varied greatly depending on the type of snow and the specific terrain where the tribe lived. For dense forests, craftsmen made shorter and wider models, often oval in shape. This shape was necessary so that hunters could maneuver comfortably between densely growing trees and bushes. Long skis would simply get caught on branches and hinder turning. For open spaces and endless plains, completely different snowshoes were used. They were long and narrow with a raised nose, similar to the bow of a boat. This shape allowed for greater speed on straight distances and made it easier to overcome snowdrifts. The craftsmanship of these devices was highly valued by the tribe. A person's life depended directly on the quality of the wooden frame and weaving. The reliability of the equipment was critically important in the harsh conditions of the wilderness. A broken snowshoe far from camp meant almost certain death from cold and exhaustion. Therefore, the wood was carefully selected, steamed, and bent with special care so that it would not crack in the cold. Each knot in the leather lacing was checked repeatedly before departure. In addition to snowshoes, simple but effective sleds were actively used to transport cargo. They were made from stiff bison hides, with the wool facing down or fastened together from the ribs of large animals. They were used to transport firewood, heavy carcasses of hunted animals, or small children wrapped in furs, gliding easily over the hard snow. Pulling such a load was much easier than carrying it on your back. Horses, which were indispensable in summer, were practically useless in deep, loose snow. Their hooves cut through the snow crust, the animals injured their legs on the icy crust, and often became a burden for the nomads. They needed food, which was difficult to obtain under the snow. Therefore, in winter, people mainly relied only on their own strength and endurance. The tribe's winter mobility was limited by natural conditions, but life did not stop and was not completely paralyzed. Scouts on snowshoes constantly patrolled the vicinity of the camp, guarding it from enemies. They could silently approach the enemy or notice the approach of strangers in advance. This ensured safety even in the most severe blizzards. However, the very skill of walking on snowshoes required a special technique in serious physical training. The load on the legs was very specific, and beginners often suffered from inflamed tendons due to the unfamiliar, wide-legged walking style. To avoid problems, children were taught this art from an early age. Training was turned into a fun game and a speed competition. This training allowed the tribe to maintain control over their territory even during the snowiest months of the year. Without this technology, people would have been prisoners in their homes, completely cut off from food resources. Snowshoes literally turned snow from a deadly enemy into a reliable road. It was the key to the survival of entire peoples. In winter, frozen riverbeds were also actively used as natural highways for long-distance travel. The ice, covered with compacted snow, was a smooth and convenient path through impassable forests and deep ravines. Walking along the river was always faster than making your way through a windfall. This made it possible to connect remote camps. The Indians knew their land well and understood where the ice was reliable and where dangerous open water or thin spots were hidden. They knew how to read the river even under a thick blanket of snow, noticing the slightest changes in color or relief. A mistake could cost a life, so the most experienced trackers always went ahead. The entire transportation system was perfectly adapted to the harsh conditions of winter. The organization of the camp was not chaotic. It obeyed strict rules that enhanced protection from the elements. The teepees were placed in a circle, forming a hoop, a sacred ring that had both spiritual and practical significance. The entrance to the circle always remained open to the east, facing the sun, and the perimeter created an additional wind barrier. The outer row of dwellings took the brunt of the wind, protecting the inner space, where there could be paddocks for horses or a place for gatherings. This layout allowed all residents to see each other and react quickly to any danger. Inside the circle, there was a sense of unity and security, which was psychologically important during the long, dark nights. Neighbors always knew what was happening in the nearest tiepiece and could come to the rescue if someone's fire went out or they ran out of food. It was a system of collective security where everyone's survival depended on everyone else. Loneliness in the steppe was equivalent to death, so social ties were strengthened as much as possible. A large tepee was often set up in the center of the camp for the Council of Chiefs, which also served as a place for general ceremonies. Here, issues of migration, hunting, and resource distribution were decided. Discipline in the winter camp was stricter than in the summer, as the price of a mistake increased many times over. The soldiers of the tribe, members of military societies, monitored order in the implementation of council decisions. They controlled the hunt so that no one would scare away the game prematurely. The circular layout also reflected the cosmology of the Indians, their idea of the cyclical nature of time and life. The camp was a model of the universe, where each clan occupied its specific place in accordance with the cardinal directions. This brought order and meaning to their harsh existence, turning survival into a sacred ritual. Even garbage was taken outside the circle to specific places so as not to disturb the purity of the space. Sanitation was important to avoid disease in the crowded camp. In winter, people visited each other, held feasts when supplies allowed, and maintained a social life. The camp buzzed with voices, laughter, and songs, despite the howling blizzard outside. This social warmth was no less important than the warmth from the fires. The feeling of camaraderie helped overcome winter depression and fear of the elements. The circle was a symbol of the infinity of life and the strength of the people. Winter was not only a time of harsh struggle for physical survival, but also a crucial period for the flourishing of culture and the transmission of knowledge. When snowstorms raged outside, covering all the paths, and daylight hours became very short, the life of the tribe moved inside the dwellings. People gathered around the central hearth to warm themselves and listen to skilled storytellers. The warmth of the fire and the voice of the elder created a special, almost magical atmosphere of comfort in the middle of the icy desert. This was a period of intense learning for young people, a kind of school of life. The elders passed on myths about the creation of the world, detailed history of the tribe, and strict moral laws through fascinating legends. Children listened to these tales, memorizing every word so that one day they could pass them on to their descendants. Winter evenings became a school, library, and theater all at once. Oral tradition was the only reliable way to preserve the identity of the people and not lose themselves. A key element in preserving memory was recording history through so-called winter counts. These were specially prepared bison hides on which drawings were made, usually in a spiral pattern. Each year was marked by only one major event, which was chosen by the entire tribal council. It could be a particularly harsh winter, a great battle, or an outbreak of disease. The drawing served as a key to memory, unlocking a whole chain of memories. The keeper of the winter account solemnly unfolded the skin and, pointing to the symbols, recounted the tribe's chronicle over many decades. Listeners gathered around, for whom these signs came to life in vivid images of the past. Thus, snow was not an enemy, but a resource. One only needed to know how to work with it, not to fight it, but to use its structure. This paradox, warming oneself with cold, is one of the most striking examples of human adaptation to the environment. Those who understood the nature of snow lived various games and gambling helped pass the long hours and relieve the tension of being confined in a small space. One of the most popular games was hide and seek, where you had to guess which hand your opponent was holding a bone or pebble in. Such games entertained both children and adult warriors, sometimes lasting for entire days. The process was often accompanied by rhythmic songs, drumming, and loud betting. Jewelry, weapons, or clothing were used as stakes, which added excitement to the game. Laughter and excitement were the best cure for fear, despondency, and winter depression. People knew how to find sincere joy, even in the simplest things, supporting each other. Spiritual life did not stop for a moment either. Shamans performed ceremonies, prayers, and purification rituals to appease the spirits of winter. Special attention in the education system was paid to developing iron endurance and endless patience. Complaining about the piercing cold or constant hunger was considered absolutely unworthy and a sign of weakness. Even small children learned to endure hardship with cold dignity, imitating adult warriors in everything. Whining and tantrums were harshly suppressed by public opinion. Psychological resilience was trained as rigorously as physical strength or marksmanship. Men, for example, would plunge into an icy river every morning to temper their bodies and spirits. A person who knew how to control himself in a critical situation was much more valuable to the tribe than a strong but unbalanced fighter. Calmness was a guarantee that a hunter would not panic in a difficult moment. Ultimately, winter was not perceived by the Indians as an enemy, but as a time of necessary rest and deep renewal for the land and its people. It was a natural pause in the endless summer race for bison and constant warfare with enemies. Nature fell asleep, and man had to slow down with it. Accepting the rhythms of nature relieved people of unnecessary stress and anxiety. The Indians did not try to fight winter or hate it. They lived through this season as a necessary part of the great cycle of life. They knew that after the snows, spring would surely come, and the grass would turn green again. The philosophy of complete harmony with the surrounding world was a solid foundation for their mental health. The biggest headache and main concern of the winter camp was always the horses. These animals were rightly considered the main wealth and the only means of transportation for the nomadic Indians of the plains. Huge herds, numbering in the thousands in wealthy tribes, required a tremendous amount of feed every day. In winter, this task became truly titanic, as all the grass was securely hidden under a thick layer of snow. In normal times, horses were able to find food for themselves by breaking through the snow cover with their hooves down to the ground. However, in severe frosts or after a thaw, when a hard ice crust formed, they were physically unable to break through it. The sharp ice cut the animals' legs until they bled, and they stopped trying to reach the grass. Then came a critical moment for the entire tribe. People had to intervene immediately to save their animals from imminent starvation. To solve the problem of hunger, the Indians drove the herds to wine-protected river valleys where dense poplar thickets grew. The sweet and juicy inner bark of this tree served as excellent nutritious food. It was rich in carbohydrates and provided the necessary energy when the usual dry grass was completely unavailable. Men and women spent whole days cutting branches and scraping the bark off them with knives. First and foremost, this was how the most valuable war horses and broodmares were fed. Preparing feed became hard and exhausting daily work that did not stop until the warm weather arrived. But the Indians understood perfectly well that losing horses in winter meant a complete loss of mobility and military strength in spring. Without horses, the tribe became easy prey for their enemies and could not hunt bison. The hungry animals eagerly gnawed on tree trunks, leaving characteristic white marks on them. Even years later, these marks made it possible to find the location of an old winter camp without fail. The best horses were treated with reverence, almost like members of the family or close relatives. At night, beloved war horses were often brought right inside the warm tepee where people slept. Sometimes special temporary shelters were built for them out of branches and skins to protect them from the piercing wind. The animals were carefully covered with old blankets or bison skins, trying to keep them as warm as possible. During fierce blizzards, the main herd instinctively huddled together in a tight group, warming each other with their body heat. People kept watch around the clock to ensure that the animals did not scatter in the blizzard and get lost in the white mist. It was also necessary to protect the weakened herd from hungry wolves, which were always circling nearby. Horse theft by enemies was rare in winter due to the deep snow, but the risk of such a raid still remained. If there was a catastrophic shortage of stored feed, the Indians had to cut down huge trees. This was done so that the horses could eat the thin, tender branches and bark from the very top of the crown. This forced activity greatly changed the landscape around the camp, significantly thinning the coastal forest. The ecological balance was maintained only because the tribe never stayed in one place for too long. As soon as the resources in the immediate vicinity were depleted, the camp was immediately moved. The people moved just a few kilometers down or up the river, where there were more trees. This constant movement was the main guarantee of keeping the herd alive during the harshest months. The Indians roamed in search of food for their animals, subordinating their lives to their needs. Despite all their heroic efforts, by spring the horses were often severely emaciated and looked like skeletons. It took them quite a long time to recover their strength on the first lush green grass. During this transition period, the tribe was most vulnerable to attack, as it was impossible to escape pursuit. The care of horses clearly showed how dependent the formidable people of the prairies were on their four-legged companions. It was a true symbiosis, where humans provided protection and food in difficult times, and horses provided speed and freedom during the rest of the year. The Great Plains Indian system of winter survival was not a set of random techniques, but a comprehensive and deeply thought-out strategy. It combined engineering solutions in tepee architecture, a deep knowledge of geography, skill in the use of materials, and a powerful social organization. They did not try to conquer nature by brute force, as Europeans often did, but integrated themselves into it, using its laws to their advantage. The wind made their dwellings more stable, the snow provided water and roads, and animal skins became a second skin. This experience shows us that comfort and safety depend not so much on technology as on understanding the world around us and the ability to adapt. The winter camp was a living organism, capable of withstanding the harshest storms while preserving the warmth of human life inside. Their legacy is a lesson in resilience and wisdom that is still relevant today. Which of these ancient survival techniques do you find most ingenious and applicable in the modern world? Would you like to see a video about how Native Americans hunted bison before the advent of horses? Write your suggestions in the comments and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on new journeys into history.